Hello and welcome to the City of Peoria Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission is composed of volunteer citizens appointed by the City Council. The Commission is the designated hearing body for a range of land use applications, including general plan amendments, rezones, conditional use permits, and amendments to the zoning code. Upon recommendation by the Commission, general plan amendments, rezones, and zoning code amendments proceed forward to the Peoria City Council for final action. For conditional use permits, the Commission will make a final decision subject to appeal. All hearings are conducted in accordance with the rules for procedure requirements to allow an impartial and efficient hearing, and all Commission meetings are open to the public under the Arizona Open Meeting Law. Each case will be called in the order in which it appears on the agenda unless otherwise announced during the meeting. Once called, City staff will give a presentation of the case, followed by a presentation from the applicant if they so desire. After the applicant's presentation, members of the public who have submitted a speaker's request form will be called to speak by the Commission Chair. The applicant may be called to provide additional information, clarification, or a rebuttal. The Commission will discuss the case, may ask additional questions, and take action. Any member of the public wishing to speak must complete a speaker's request form and hand it to the planning assistant at the end of the dais. When speaking, please limit your comments to a maximum of 3 minutes and try not to repeat statements already made by others. We welcome your comments, and as fellow citizens of Peoria, we thank you in advance for your participation.
All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the City of Peoria. Today is Thursday, August 18th. My name is Clay Alsop. Let's start with our roll call tonight. Vice Chair Tony Fighter. Present. Secretary Linda Grice.
Present.
Commissioner Sean Hutchinson. Not present. Commissioner Jeff Nelson.
Present.
And Commissioner Josephine Waitman.
Present.
Thank you. We'll proceed to item 1C, the consent agenda items 1C and 2C tonight. Disposition of absence and minutes from the July 21, 2022 meeting. Do we have any comments or motion on the consent agenda?
Chair, I move we approve consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll proceed to new business for tonight. Item 3R, school-related traffic coordination. Staff, please present your report.
Good evening, Chair Alsop and members of the Commission. I'm excited to present to you an update on some of the work we've been doing at the City of Peoria Traffic Engineering Division to help alleviate some of those concerns with school-related traffic. As many of you probably all know, it's August. That means back to school, and with that comes all those extra trips on the roads, all that extra traffic and congestion. So we've got a couple of examples to discuss today that are very recent from some of our work. One of the examples I want to start with is some of the work we've been doing with Coyote Hills Elementary School. This is a school that shares the same campus with Peoria Traditional School. It's located on 87th Avenue north of Lake Pleasant Parkway. And it is a little bit different than most schools. I won't say unique, but different than most schools because, as I said, it does have two schools operating at the same campus with two different arrival and dismissal times. It has small parking lots that are reserved for the parents for pickup and drop-off times. And the main large parking lot had been reserved for school buses, and where those have to keep completely separate from the parent pickup drop-off area by state law and state codes. One of the other items worth discussing is there have been, in the last several months, maybe even year or so, some critical shortages in bus drivers, which has affected some of the bus routes, which has had an impact on the number of driving parents. So some of the concerns we've heard expressed to us from residents is there had been worse than normal backups on 87th Avenue, backing up all the way to Lake Pleasant Parkway, driveways, bike lanes, intersections being blocked up, through lanes blocked up, which causes delays for motorists and especially the school buses, which the timing of those school buses is critical because often after a delivery to one location, the school buses have another destination, so they have to keep that route. If they can't get to the school, obviously there's a pretty significant impact. And just all around congestion and frustration at the school. So that's why we were contacted. So our first step is to perform a site assessment at the school. So basically we go to the school, brave the heat, and count cars right at the dismissal time to see what is the worst case scenario at the school. And after we take our notes, we will map what that looks like. And this little screenshot here, this little image is our map of, as closely as we could replicate it, what the school looked like at the time of the dismissal. We counted a total of 151 vehicles that were not in parking spaces, so queued up in the two different parking lots, the northern parking lot and the southern parking lot. That's the area where you see the line of little vehicles with the green haze around them. We also saw the vehicles queued up on 87th Avenue and Quail to the north, and all the way around onto 88th Lane. The different colors just indicate whether those cars are staged or queued legally, or whether they're parked or queued illegally or creating some sort of violation. So red is our violation vehicles, and you can see there's quite a few of them. There were only 29 of those 151 vehicles that were actually queued up legally on the site. 77 of those vehicles were in places that were really undesirable. And that backup went all the way to Lake Pleasant Parkway, and at times it even spilled onto Lake Pleasant Parkway in the curb lane, which is definitely not a good thing. Just a personal note, I've been observing traffic at Peoria for about 17 years. I've done, I don't know how many observations at this school, and this is about twice the number of vehicles I've ever seen. I normally count about 75 vehicles. So this observation, there were 151, which is a dramatic increase. So here's some pictures from our CCTV camera at 87th Avenue and Lake Pleasant Parkway. The upper left-hand corner, you can see the little code there, 87LPP. You can see this was on Valentine's Day, 2022, at 7:48 in the morning. And you can see what happens with traffic as it spills out. Just north, just on the other side of that bus is actually the driveway that's very close to Lake Pleasant Parkway, where the parents were entering and exiting. So you can see that line of vehicles not only fills up the space for the two-way left turn lane, but spills into the northbound through lane, which obviously creates a bottleneck at that location. And the greatest congestion was usually about 7:45 a.m. For the 8 a.m. start time for Coyote Hills Elementary. This is a screenshot from the afternoon. This was at 3:01 p.m. and school for the classes for Coyote Hills dismiss at 3 o'clock. So this is about at the worst, but you can see the line of vehicles is creating a really difficult maneuver for that school bus. It's trying to squeeze through between the car and the bike lane. There have been other times that a bus would not even be able to make this maneuver based on the backups at this location. One of the concerns that's significant in the afternoon is, even though there are two different dismissals, there's a 2:30 dismissal for Peoria Traditional School and a 3 p.m. dismissal for Coyote Hills, parents show up so early, they mix. So those two groups tend to mix together, and it just really gums up operations at the school. Even when those first kids are dismissed, not everyone is moving through the way they should. So it creates a lot of complication and a lot of delays. So once we observe conditions, our goal is to try to find out a way that we can accommodate all those vehicles safely and efficiently, maximizing the number of vehicles on site, but also worrying about where the walking students go, where the buses go, where bike riders, who are taking all those modes of transportation into into consideration. And this model up on the screen right now shows our plan to maximize on-site storage of those vehicles. We're going to route all the vehicles to the northern driveway and enter the main parking lot and double stack those vehicles all the way through for as long as we could, and then merge them to a single file line for the loading. In order to do this, we had to relocate the buses. and there were few enough buses, we could actually get them in that small northern parking lot where the note says 26 vehicles. It's kind of obscuring the small parking lot. But that was also relying on that area being accessible and not blocked by vehicles. Now you may say, I still see a lot of red vehicles. Why is that? The reason is, even with maximizing the number of vehicles on site, we still couldn't accommodate all those vehicles. So we use our best judgment and experience to figure out where would these vehicles most likely go. And we assumed that a lot of the vehicles, as many as possible, would line up on 87th Avenue northbound. But once that space ran out, parents would go onto Quail, also on southbound 87th Avenue, and just find space because they have to go somewhere. So we realized even with this plan alone was not going to be enough, and we also needed something extra to reduce the number of vehicles, and that was through the recommendation of a no early arrival policy to the parents. And I will be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation. So after implementation, the school took our recommendations and said, we're going to follow through with the new circulation plan. They coordinated with their parents. And the first day of school, which I will say, we always brace for the worst on the first day of school. It is what it is. More parents than ever actually get out of the vehicles and walk the kids to the school. There's just always more congestion, especially that first day of school, but even the first few weeks of school. But on that first day of school, this is a screenshot here from our camera that shows right at the worst time, 7:45 a.m., that our backup got up to the point where there was no more storage in that two-way left turn lane, but it didn't go beyond that point. This is the worst backup right here that you see on the screen. Because the vehicles were able to queue so much further, they weren't turning into that first driveway north of Lake Pleasant Parkway, they were going to the next driveway a few more 100 feet to the north, and then again, either single or double file stacking through the parking lot. So from this perspective, it didn't look that bad, surprisingly. Now the afternoon, again, I mentioned we have two dismissal times, 2:30 for Peoria Traditional School and 3 o'clock for Coyote Hills. So this was right at 2:30. And that little red circle shows, it's kind of hard to see from the perspective of the camera. There are one or two vehicles that were queued up in that two-way left turn lane waiting to turn left into the parking lot at 2:30. Not too bad at all. No congestion that we can see from this view. So it was looking pretty good for the first day. Now, the second dismissal for Coyote Hills Elementary is at 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, the queue looked like this. You can see it's still not filling up all of the space. There's still room for another vehicle or two in that two-way left turn lane. But the problem was at 3 o'clock, normally within a minute or two, the queue starts moving and things start rolling along. But it didn't. Again, this was the first day of school, but that queue just kind of sat there for, this is 10 minutes later at 3:10. You can see it really hasn't moved that much, but parents surprised me that they were using some good judgment that they decided if the line is backed up to this point, they pulled forward, went further north, made a U-turn to queue up southbound to avoid the complete congestion and gridlock all the way to Lake Pleasant Parkway. So that was actually a help that it relieved some of the pressure. But again, that queue just was not moving. Even by 3:20, finally we start to see the queue moving, and it was flowing nicely at that point, and it cleared out by 3:40. The queue was pretty much off of 87th Avenue. Not too bad for a first day. We did hear some concerns and complaints that the pickup process took about 40 minutes, but again, for a first day of school, from my experience, that's really not too bad, especially for a new plan. But the true test is what happens beyond that. So we watched the second day. 7:45, you can see the queue just kind of on the top end near where it says LPP. Not too bad. That was at 7:45. That's as bad as it got during the morning. So 87th Avenue was looking really good the morning by the second day, which in my opinion is really phenomenal. Now let's look at the afternoon. That 2:30 dismissal for Peoria Traditional School, there weren't even any vehicles queued up on 87th Avenue, which is, that's a beautiful thing. By 3 o'clock, We did see the queue that was filling up about all of that space at 3 o'clock, right as Coyote Hills dismisses, but we noticed fewer of the parents showed up early, which is a great thing to help us out with some of that pressure. But by 3:02, the line started moving and it flowed exactly as it should. So by the time we get to 3:20, 3:10, 3:20, it was pretty much cleared off the street. And the full, from what I understand from the school, all the kids were pretty much loaded up by about 22 minutes after the bell by the second day. Again, from my experience, for a second day, that really was a phenomenal success. So overall, the morning, from day one, we didn't see any significant delays or blocked lanes, so that's a good thing. The afternoon, it settled into a pattern of about 20 minutes for the dismissal. I think it can get better. I think it will get better as the students, parents, and teachers are better trained and just ready for the routine of everything, and parents show up a little bit later. But the majority of those congestion concerns were alleviated. That southbound queue, we did hear, we couldn't see it from the camera, but we did hear there was a southbound queue that reportedly backed up all the way to Deer Valley Road. So that is still a concern. It's not as big a concern, but it is a concern we want to address. So it just highlights what we saw from our model, that even with this new circulation plan, we still need that second component, which is the no early arrival policy. So I wanted to talk about what a no early arrival policy is. It's actually pretty simple. Our case study is Legacy Traditional School, where I'd say we, but really it was the school implemented a successful no early arrival policy. Some of the concerns at Legacy, they have a very small parking lot for the number of students, but they do actually have, despite the small parking lot, they have about a half mile of queuing on Hillcrest with a marked parking lane that does allow queuing without creating concerns. However, in addition, there is an eighth of a mile of additional on-street parking adjacent to the park that's just adjacent to the school campus. So there is a lot of parking in the area. They also have 3 staggered dismissals and a very efficient pickup process through something called Driveline that helps match the kids up with the cars. So by the time the cars pull up, the kids are all ready to be loaded. The problem is, it doesn't matter how efficient your pickup process is before the kids are released. And when the parents show up early, there's nothing you can do about that. So this thick red line on the aerial represents how long the queue was backing up every day on Hillcrest and on 83rd Avenue in the northbound curb lane during the dismissal time. So it's over 4,000 feet of queue. And once that first bell rings, the queue starts moving. But the problem is, again, until those kids are dismissed, those cars aren't going anywhere. So this was a significant concern. We had a meeting with the principal and talked to him about implementing a no early arrival policy. And it really is as simple as telling the parents, just don't show up more than 5 minutes before the bell rings. It's very easy for me to say that. I don't know what mountains he had to move to make that happen, to convince the parents to do that. But I'll tell you, he did, and I do commend him. As the principal over at Legacy is Nathan LaFawn, and I've actually asked him several times if he could speak with the principals at other schools that tell me that this can't be done, because he made it happen. So what we had seen, what was contributing to the problems, the parents were showing up early. Even though there were 3 dismissals, each staggered by 15 minutes, once again, all of the parents were showing up, so they were mixing. So we weren't getting any benefit for that stagger of the dismissals. So by the time that first bell rings, we have a full line of vehicles for all 3 dismissals. And that made the worst condition right at the time of the first dismissal. And really, that staggered dismissal didn't help us one bit. It doesn't help the school alleviate the concerns one bit when you don't have enough distance and time between the staggers, or when the parents are mixing in the same queue. So again, the no early arrival policy, the core of it is parents don't arrive more than 5 minutes before the child's dismissal. And the way they were able to tell this is they've got colored placards for each of the dismissals. So as the parents drive through, if the staff member that sees them sees the wrong color placard, They get kicked out of line, have to circulate back through again and get back at the line. So they learn pretty quickly. It doesn't make sense to show up early. Just show up on time and you'll run through quicker. And really, it didn't take too many times for parents to catch on. And the end result was the whole process just worked so much faster, because when you have a line of 100, well, no, I won't even say 100. If you have a line of 25 cars as opposed to 200 cars, it's a lot easier to get the kids matched up with the cars. And as more cars show up, it just doesn't feel like as much of an impact. It's constantly rolling and moving, and it never backs up. It never even should get close to 83rd Avenue. So after this was implemented, there was a lot of an ebb and flow to it, but I would say on average, the maximum queue was at about 1,500 feet, which roughly shows where that thick red line is on this aerial. There would be an ebb and flow to it, but usually that's about the worst it would get. The caveat to that is this was last school year. So as I mentioned with the beginning of a new school year, people need to be retrained, and the same is true at Legacy Traditional School. And we were seeing backups to 83rd Avenue for the first week and a half. But as of last Friday, I wasn't seeing the queue all the way to 83rd Avenue. And I spoke with Mr. LaFawn at Legacy, and he said, we're getting better every day. We're training the parents again. So they're making progress and getting back to where we really want them to be. And ultimately, as long as that line isn't backing up into 83rd Avenue, we're happy. It's not a safety concern on a busy arterial street. So what the policy can do, a no early arrival policy, can reduce congestion near schools. And the best part is this can work at any school because it doesn't require any infrastructure or great expenses to implement. So no matter how small your parking lot is, I'm convinced that you can still have a great impact on reducing the traffic congestion around schools. But what it does require is a confident school administrator, someone who says, I will make this happen, I will get the word out and enforce it. I've been told many, many times over the past 20 plus years that this will not work. And people who say that are right, because they, for whatever reason, don't believe it can work and don't have the confidence to make it work, or maybe they don't even have the support to make it work, but I know it can with the right combination of administrators and support from the district or organization, whatever type of school it is. It also requires reminders and reinforcement. This isn't one and done. You don't just tell the parents to do it and they behave thereafter. Bad behaviors start to creep back in, so it needs monitoring. And of course, the beginning of the school year, you're retraining new parents and parents and students who kind of forgot over the long weeks away from school. So it does take retraining to get them back in tip-top shape once again to get that congestion cleared off the street. And with that, I would open this up to the commission members for any questions.
Thank you, appreciate that. First, we'll have a comment from Commissioner Waitman.
A wonderful presentation, wonderful. So I really loved seeing the congestion. I think that was the second slide. I'm not sure if you can pull that back up, but I remember seeing the red cars and seeing the green cars. So we obviously seen the significant change that happened through this traffic coordination method that we're using. My question is this. You have to go back. I think the red and green cars. Yes, right here. So on 87 Drive, and I think the drive next to it, we see red cars, and my concern is for the residents there. I see red cars right here in residential neighborhoods blocking off driveways, right? So this new method, since we did not see a slide with, those residential areas, did that kind of clear up that congestion too? Because if I live there and you're pulling in front of my driveway, I'm reckoning, in the morning they have to get to work too. So is this new way of traffic coordinating clearing that up too for the residents? Because that's my concern. They're all parked in each driveway in every residential neighborhood.
Sure. Chairman Alsop and Commission Member Waitman, I have not performed a site assessment yet, and our camera is limited to 87th Avenue and Lake Pleasant Parkway, so we don't know what exactly it looks like on Quail and those other streets, 87th Drive and the cul-de-sac. We'd heard the report that there was the queue southbound on 87th Avenue, so this was just our guess based on human nature what people might do. And those areas are already, if they're red, they would indicate there's already no parking signs present, so they would be violating law if they were parked there. We will be taking a view at that location really soon. To be very frank, we usually don't do observations the first few weeks of school because it's not representative of what's really happening at a school location, but we're probably going to be getting out there for an assessment in the field either next week or the week after to see what is really going on. But the real key is getting that no early arrival policy in effect, where parents would not feel pressure to go somewhere to violate parking restrictions. So the key really is that no early arrival policy.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting and very creative solution, and hats off to you for working with the school district to alleviate this issue. I'm just curious if there are any lessons from a traffic planning perspective or any lessons or takeaways that we as a commission should take from this, that things that we should be looking for, and maybe these are so unique that it wouldn't apply to most things we consider, but any lessons that we can take from this? Any lessons that you've taken from this? I'm curious.
Yes, Chairman and Commission members. We have learned, we do know what is needed to make a school successful, to have sufficient queuing and space for queuing for parents. The disadvantage we have is that so many of the schools are already built, and they were built at a time when there were far fewer driving parents. The silver lining is new schools that are developing. They have the advantage of the thorough review from planning, from site development, and from traffic engineering. And at that point, during the traffic study, we ensure that there is sufficient queuing, that the school has a circulation plan that has contingencies and backups and utilizes any potential legal on-street parking or queuing. And the best example I can give of you of that would be the Academy of Math and Science that opened a few years ago on Peoria between 77th Avenue and 79th Avenue. That was the first school we'd worked with where we actually went into a development agreement with the school to have performance measurements, to require a cap on their enrollment. And if they wanted to increase their enrollment, they would have to return to the city with an updated traffic study, and they were required to actually follow the circulation plan developed in the traffic impact analysis. So that's much more involvement than we've had with any other school, and I'm really proud to say that that's the only school that we've never really had any problems on the surrounding street. There was, I think, one day where there was a backup on Peoria Avenue, maybe last year. We found out they weren't using the circulation plan, and that was corrected the next day. And I just this week was the first time I ever set foot on campus to observe pickup drop-off, the pickup drop-off process, because I never had to before, and the only reason I did was just to see what is going on, because I was curious how it's working on the campus.
Any other commissioners? Yeah, just a question, and I think you partially answered it. I don't believe any school sites would come to the commission, so that's strictly going to be for you guys at the staff level to mitigate the parking. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay, so we don't have to be the bad guys. You guys are the ones that are working with the schools to.
We can be the bad guys.
Yeah, no, but thank you. That's it's an issue where I live further north on Lake Pleasant Parkway. And I know that's challenging, so I appreciate the efforts to do that. And I'll express my wife's thanks to you as well, because I told her, I'm like, look what's on the agenda tonight. She was very excited. If there's no further comments, I'll open up to public. Seeing none here, I'll close the public meeting. Any other commissioner comments? We'll move on to item 4R. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, as we get queued up for the next one, that we introduce Michael Dines, our Assistant City Attorney, and he's going to provide a presentation on best practices for the commission. I promise this isn't, we're not picking on the commission, we're actually doing a refresher with all our boards and commissions, so just a nice refresher here. Mike?
Good evening. It's nice to be able to address you instead of sitting next to you in silence as I do most evenings, most of these meetings. So as Chris said, we have a brief presentation on public meeting law. Hopefully that'll be a refresher for you. Shouldn't be a whole lot of new information, but just kind of remind you of some of the high points and some of the things to excuse me, some of the things to watch out for to stay out of trouble, both for yourselves and for the city. All right, so open meeting law. The intent of the open meeting law is to be transparent. So one of the things that we want to emphasize is attempts to sort of legalistically interpret the provisions or to kind of to try to lawyer around things are frowned upon. So when the Attorney General, when they look into complaints, they want people to err on the side of being open and transparent. That any sort of cuteness or sort of technical, I tried, this doesn't exactly say this, but we did this. If it's not erring on the side of being transparent, the Attorney General is not going to be happy. So just in general, as you approach this issue, think open, transparent, let the public know whatever you guys are doing. So what is a meeting? A meeting is a gathering in person or through technological devices of a quorum members of a public body, which they discuss, propose, or take legal action, including deliberations by a quorum with respect to such action. So it's a long sentence to basically say that whenever you guys get together and there's a quorum, it's potentially a meeting. So if there's enough of you, which would be 4, to qualify as a quorum, and anybody discusses a topic, whether it's formal like tonight, which is a formal meeting, or if you guys run into each other at one of the neighborhood meetings or things that we do, that happens. If there's 4 of you there and an issue is discussed, it would be a violation of the open meeting rule. So that's one thing to watch out for is circumstances. A lot of commission members run in similar circles. You know similar people, so you might find yourself in places where multiple people are together. So just be aware that in those circumstances, you'd want to avoid the appearance of any impropriety. So just avoid making it look like you're discussing it. Definitely avoid discussing, but also I say go the extra mile and avoid making it look like you're even discussing any sort of issues. The other point on this is through technological devices. We often think of a meeting as everybody gets together and it's synchronous, right? But now we have technological devices that provide asynchronous mediums like texting, and a common thing is a reply all to an email. If there's an email, if an email goes out and it goes to everybody and somebody replies all and it has something to do with discussions before the board, that would qualify as a meeting. So those are kind of the traps to watch out for, the asynchronous mediums where you actually create a meeting without really knowing it. A group text thread would not be good if you guys have a group text going on, so that would be something to avoid. The other sort of, I guess, cuteness people have tried to do with, in regards to this is to sort of the divide and conquer approach, where one person will go to one member, and then one person will go to the next member and say, hey, they told me this, and then they told me, and pretty soon you have a meeting. It's not in real time, but everybody is discussing through another person or even a member the thing. So that's something that the Attorney General has just explicitly said is not appropriate. And it's one of those things that it may not occur to you that that's what's happening. So just to be aware of those things. Public body, clearly, you guys are a public body. Any of the Peoria's boards and commissions qualify, so any of the boards and commissions have to abide by the open meeting law. And quorum, for a 7-member body, it's 4. It's 50% plus 1, so it's a majority of the body. So anytime there's 4 of you together, it's potentially a meeting. So the other side of the open meeting law is notice. So the public has a right to know what's going to be on the meeting in case they want to come and hear about it. The agenda is how we sort of organize that notice. It has to be finalized 24 hours in advance, so things that come up other than emergencies have to be on the agenda at least 24 hours. That's to give people enough time to decide if they want to be here, if they want to comment on something. The agenda also has to have some specificity as to what it is going to contain. It can't just say discussion on future development in Peoria or something like that would could be everything that you guys discussed. So there has to be some specificity to the agenda. And if it's not on the agenda, it can't be discussed, and there can be no legal action. So, let's see, my slide here. I'll get back to that last point in a minute, but minutes, you guys have all seen the minutes, they're just the recording of what happens. It's another way for the public to know what happened, to have a recordation of what you guys decided. Executive session is the exception to the rule for that everything has to be in public. There are specific statutory reasons that you guys could have an executive session. It doesn't come up very often. The most common one would probably be to seek legal advice. So if you have legal questions beyond what you may have a quick question you want to ask me here, but if there's something you want to go in more depth, you can talk to Chris and we can set an executive session where we can discuss those issues. In those sessions, those minutes are confidential. Nobody there can share anything. If I was subpoenaed to testify, I couldn't share what happened in those meetings. So those are confidential for you guys. So the call to the public, and a minute ago we talked about things on the agenda. The call to the public is one of those sticky points where things tend to come up that aren't on the agenda. So sometimes you guys may be discussing an issue and it may lead to something else that's not on the agenda. At that time, you'll hear either me or Chris jump up and say, hey, this is not on the agenda, we can talk about this another time. But the other common circumstance where this could happen is the call to the public, where somebody stands up and starts talking about something, oftentimes with vitriol or contempt as to what somebody did, and it's, and they're really upset. The call to the public is limited. So if we decide to have a call to the public, I don't know if the public is required.
We do have a section on our agenda for that.
Okay, but is it optional if the commission member decides not to, or we just put it?
If it's on the agenda, I think we have to do it, but I think it's optional to put it on the agenda.
That's what I get. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. So if we do the call to the public, we follow the general guidelines. One of the things that can come up is, and we experienced this a while back. We had a lot of people here, right? A lot of people wanted to speak, and the first person speaks, and they go a little long, but because they're the first person, we give them a little grace. But then after like the third person goes long, we start to calculate how many people are in line, and if everybody goes 2 minutes over, we're going to be here for another hour and a half. So then we start to cut everybody off at the 3 minutes. My advice, the best thing to do is always be strict, rigid, stop at 3 minutes, because if the first person came out on one side and then the third person, if the first person went 5 minutes, then the third person comes out on the other side and you cut them off at 3 minutes, then they say, well, the other side had an extra 2 minutes, right? And then it becomes they think you're biased and there's accusations fly. So ultimately, the best thing to do is cut it short. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it sneaks up, and sometimes it's not. You don't know it's going to be contentious, and then it turns out to be. So you can still impose those restrictions, even if it wasn't equally imposed. It's more of an optics thing with that. So just to make sure that in those times that it's always best to be strict and stick to your guns from the beginning. Now, if somebody does go off the agenda and starts to attack you, there are essentially three choices that you could deal with an item that's not on the agenda in the call to the public. You can respond to criticism. So you can't discuss an issue, but if somebody said something that's untrue, or somebody says, you did this, you can respond with reasons why. I would recommend keep that minimal. And you may not even want to respond at all, because a lot of times responding to criticism is just a way for somebody to use your words further against you. Most people at that point really aren't trying to be reasonable. They're just trying to throw barbs. But you can respond to criticism. You can ask the staff to review the issue. So if something comes up and it's interesting, something you would like to discuss in the future, you can have staff review that, and you can ask them to put it on a future agenda if that's something you want to talk about. So those things can be addressed. They just can't be addressed without notice. So then the agenda has the current events updates from staff. Don't take discussion and action on those. So this is kind of the frequently asked questions of open meeting law, the things that can bite you, and most of these we talked about already. The circumventing open meeting law through technology or acts, you want to avoid that, to avoid the reply all. Splintering the quorum, that was what I talked about earlier, where you go to one person and then the next. And that can be done through meeting in person, it can be done through telephone, email. So just be aware, and usually you won't have somebody intentionally doing that. It just kind of organically happens. You say, oh, I talked to this commissioner member, then I talked to this one, and then let me go ask the other ones and see what they want to do, and then it ends up creating a meeting when there wasn't one intended. Now, as I said, the Attorney General, county attorneys can investigate and enforce open meeting law. Usually it's the Attorney General. Any person affected by the legal action can file suit. Now, the stickler is the civil penalty of $25 for the third offense. I don't know that anyone's ever had 3 offenses of open meeting law violations in the history of Arizona, but I guess it's possible. The difficult thing is it does apply to you directly, and the city can't help you out with the fine. So if there is an open meeting law violation, they would file a complaint against you personally, and the city couldn't help you with that, and they can request attorney's fees. They may not get them, but there are situations where the court could award attorney's fees. Ultimately, it could result in removal from office. I don't know that anyone has ever been removed from office for an open meeting law violation, but it could happen. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I think just the stigma of an open meeting law violation is something enough to be avoided, especially when there are methods to avoid that. So that's all I have for you this evening. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to.
Thank you. Commissioner Waitman?
Thank you, Chair Alsop. So just my question, and this may be more of a question in defense of our chair, but sometimes when we do have a call to a public, it is very hard to remove people from speaking, for sure when they're passionately engaged. I'm not sure if there is a system or an action that you would suggest, because truly we have had our chair sternly say that it is over, and they refuse to leave the stand. What do you suggest in a situation such as that?
Thank you, Chairman Alsop, Commissioner. I did, but don't take my comments as criticizing anyone. I think you've done a great job. Initially, the turning off the microphone is the first step. If people don't respond, ultimately we may have to have law enforcement if it came to that. I don't think it would ever come to that. There's really not, other than giving them a stern talking to and telling them to stop talking, between turning off the microphone and the stern talking to, there's not a whole lot of intermediate steps. Chris, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think we do a really good job. I think sometimes people are up there speaking and they don't realize that they're so impassioned and they're into their what they want to say. They're not always looking up at the screen up here to look at the countdown. So I think just a reminder that your time is up. Please wrap up your comments as quickly as possible, and that if they keep speaking, you might have to admonish them again, and then I think then you can get to the point where you're maybe cutting off the microphone, and hopefully we don't get to those points. But I would do what we've done in the past, which is try to remind them, okay, your time is up. Please wrap up your comments so that we can, have a fair and consistent hearing, let everybody speak the same amount of time. So,
yeah, and I think the other thing is that in the call to the public, it would be a little different, but if in the public comment portion, you guys haven't voted yet, so there is some sense that somebody who doesn't comply with the rules, that it reflects negatively on their position. I mean, I think that leverage is there. But
Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Dines, on occasion, we get approached by an applicant, a representative for an applicant, a development representative, saying, hey, before the meeting, this is going to be coming to you this week. We'd love to sit with you and tell you a little more about our project before the meeting. What's your guidance on that, whether we should or shouldn't do that, and why?
Chairman Alsop, Commissioner Nelson, In a vacuum, without knowing the details, wouldn't want to give advice up front, but what I would say is that if you have any question about something like that, the best step would be to contact Chris, talk it over with Chris and see what he thinks. You know, we could, depending on the circumstances, it may not necessarily be an open meeting violation, but it may not be a good idea for other reasons, you know, if undue influence sort of thing. So I would say if that happens, it's always best to let Chris know and just see if there's any problem with it. I don't know if Chris, if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, this is one of the few states where there isn't a prohibition against what they call ex parte contact. However, you know, just know that we don't provide your name and information out to developers. I mean, you guys are all volunteers as part of a body. You're not elected representatives, so we don't do that. You could take the meeting, but I do agree that it's better to have all the business kind of done in front of the public. You certainly could meet with somebody. There's not a violation that I'm aware of, but I think it's just always better to err on the side of caution and just have that discussion outwardly as part of a body.
And part of the risk in that too is if that person then met with someone else and then that person could create the round robin type of you know, meeting by doing, and which is maybe likely if they wanted to get, you know, a majority on board. So that could happen.
Commissioner Fider?
I guess the same can be said as neighbors that may be concerned about a project. They can reach out to us as well, right? It would be the same philosophy, so not just applicants, but yeah.
As Chairman Alsop, Commissioner Fider, it would be a similar analysis with that. Overall, I would encourage you to not have contact unless, I would urge you to not have contact unless you really wanted to, and then we could talk about it. Yeah.
Any other commissioners? I had a question. I didn't write it down. It has completely left me now. It'll come back later, I'm sure. But thank you. All those circumstances have happened to me. But now I have license to tell my neighbors I don't want to talk about it, so it's a violation.
You tell them the attorney, city attorney.
Yeah, I'll refer them to the city attorney's office.
Your neighbors still talk to you?
Yeah, right?
It's hard to be anonymous when you're on the commission, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dell is very good at keeping us out of trouble when our weekly agendas are sent out, so.
Good. Good. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. If you ever have if the question comes up to you, feel free to send me an email or
Thank you.
let Chris know. Thanks.
All right. Seeing no members of public here present still, I'll move on to 5R, Development Activity and Work Plan Update.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this next item, Development Activity and Work Plan Update, Lori and I are going to do a little tag team here because she doesn't do enough public presentations, of course. No, she's always up here. We're going to talk about 4 items. We wanted to give the commission a update and a briefing of several facets of our work plan. We'll talk about some of the zoning code amendments that are in play, and we'll talk about some major development cases, current status. You've been a part of a lot of them that have come in front of the commission in the recent time, and we'll give you an update of where they are today. And then Lori's going to talk about some process improvements. We're always looking to identify best practices, make tweaks where we can, try to improve things. We put out a user survey to all of our clients, those that come to the city to obtain a permit. And it's a collaboration between our department and development engineering, that group. And we'll give you a little bit of sense of the high level what the results are. We're still trying to work out what they mean and how we can identify some points of change. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll finally wrap up with future study session topics that we're in the planning phases right now. So first off, we'll talk about some of the City Nation Code amendments. I think we've talked about this in the past. One of the large amendments we're making to our code is the landscape code, and that is it is a section that's been tweaked a little bit over the time, but we haven't had a major overhaul in years. And so that's kind of what this is. We're planning to do it in 2 phases. The first phase is, we're in that stage, that tier 2A drought right now. So we've identified some low-hanging fruit that we're going to look at making some more targeted changes to our landscape code to reduce the amount of particularly ground cover and other things that will hopefully save some water usage. You'll see that fairly soon, and then at a different time over the next year, you'll see our larger landscape code, and that's where we're completely looking at how our requirements are for each new development. And really what the rubric we're looking at is right tree, right place. It's not just a matter of having, trees throughout the site. We want to make sure we have the right desert adapted tree and plants in the right places, but without sacrificing, I think our overall desire is to promote shade within the city and avoid that heat island effect being exacerbated. So that's what the landscape code update is. The next one is more targeted, and this is single-family accessory structures. I think this body, you've seen this in the past, we've brought it forward as a study session. So we've done some tweaks to it. We're gonna bring it back to you again. We've had some new ideas based upon some of the discussion we've had. These are these little accessory buildings that you have at single-family homes, particularly in the backyard. And so right now, we have 3 tiers that tell you how high it can be and what your setbacks are. It's a little convoluted, and it's been in place for about, over 20 years. And so we're looking to simplify it. We think we have a pretty good model that we want to share with you when we bring it forward, but also it's a model that I think accomplishes the thing we talked about in this body, but also won't create any non-conforming situations. In other words, if we were to pass the ordinance, it's not going to suddenly make somebody's circumstance where they're not compliant with the code. So I think that's one of the benefits there. So we'll bring that forward in the near future. The parking code's another big one as well. And that's also, like the landscape code, that's also an overhaul of that section. We're going to be not only looking at our parking ratios that we assign for different land uses, and that's really our phase 1 piece of it. And then we'll come back and look at the other tweaks that we want to make that pertain to new things that we're seeing out there, ride share, new loading requirements, those kind of things. So we want to really take a comprehensive look at the parking code. And then the last one is another big one, and that's our non-residential zoning districts. And so you may or may not know, we have about, I think, 6 or 7 commercial zoning districts and 4 industrial zoning districts. And they haven't been updated comprehensively in some time. We've had some tweaks to it over the years, and so what we're looking at doing is really reviewing those districts, creating some better distinction between each of the districts because they differ in levels of intensity. And so we want to make sure that the use schedule that identifies whether it's permitted or conditionally permitted aligns with the level of intensity that we're looking at for those districts. So that's another big amendment that we'll be bringing forward over the next year or so. Okay, second piece of this presentation, I want to talk about major development case update. So, there we go, these are certainly not all the cases you've seen. This is just a short list. We thought we would share some of the larger, more impactful ones over the last several years, and I'll go through each one of those. Starting with number 1, the Park West development. So this is at Northern and 99th Avenue. Park West has seen a resurgence in activity in recent years. You've probably read in the paper a number of recent restaurant signings, the Vig, Kasai Japanese Steakhouse. So we're seeing a lot of activity. You might also recall on the commission that we had a couple of multifamily proposals come before you. The first one was Parcel 3. Parcel 3 is the 17 acres that is located along the freeway corridor. It's in Park West, but it's just east of the existing apartment complex. So that's a development by Trammell Crow Residential, 338 units. That is under construction now. So that's currently under construction. The other one that's under construction is called the Prescott at Park West, and that, if you envision 99th Avenue, it's the west side of 99th Avenue, and that's Poricalda is the developer. That is that 5-acre site, about 95 units. I think the commission might have seen that a year and a half ago, but that's now under construction as well. The next one is 2. This is one of our more significant projects over the last year, what we call Legacy Point, and that was basically centered around 83rd Avenue and Northern in the southern portion of our city. That was about 346 acres owned by the Rovey family. Rovey family also owns some land south of Northern and Glendale, but for our purposes, we went through a very large annexation process and entitlement process. It was a joint partnership with Shea Homes, who wanted to develop the residential portion, which was the west side of that entitlement. And then the eastern side was the industrial side, and that was Van Trust, and they were the developer for that. So we have seen some activity on that case. On the residential side, the Shea Homes around, their phase one, which is around, I think, 87th, I believe, 87th and, no, I'm sorry, 79th and Northern, that's their phase one. That's about 176 lots, and they're going through construction plan review right now. So I imagine they're not too far from starting up construction. On the industrial side, and this is under construction, large tilt-up concrete building along 75th Avenue, and that's Frito-Lay. That's about 157,000 square feet of space, and that's under construction on that piece. The next one is Peoria Place, and this is a large entitlement. It is roughly, it's where the, what do we call it, the Valley Wise, is that that's the name of the medical center over here on Grand Avenue and Cotton Crossing. But all that vacant land that's south and east, that's all part of entitlement called Peoria Place. Peoria Place was entitled back in 2006. It didn't develop, and then it was entitled again a couple of years ago. We had our real estate development office with Scott White work with the landowner to reposition that entitlement. And so that area has now been purchased by Greystar, so they own all the property outside of Valleywise, the medical facility. And so they are moving forward on some site plans on that. Just to back up a little bit, you might recall on the entitlement, it was a mix of office and commercial space, particularly along Grand Avenue. South of that, what's that street? What's it? Purdue, that's right. South of that, that was all zoned for multifamily and residential. And then the eastern side of that entitlement was all industrial. So we're now seeing some site plans come in. Parcel 1, this is where, if you think of Cotton Crossing, and we're going to have a new roadway that's going to lead into Old Town. So west of Cotton Crossing, we see that as an extension of Old Town, and we want to see that energy and activity kind of flow through. And so the design standards in that entitlement were set up so that it was really supposed to be an extension of Old Town. We want to see buildings that are to the street. We're really looking for a mixed-use type of execution there. So we do have a site plan in. It is for, it's more horizontal mixed use. It is for multifamily, and there's a small amount of commercial. That's not quite the vision we had when we did the entitlement, so we're working through that site plan right now. It just came in, I want to say maybe a couple of weeks or so ago. So that's Parcel 1. Parcel 3, that's the multifamily portion of one of the multifamily portion of it. That's 266 units, 1 and 2 bedroom. That's now going through site plan as review as well. And then Parcel 6, which is the industrial parcel, that's we also have a site plan in for that. That is 3 industrial spec buildings, a total of 400,000 square feet of net leasable area. So very, very large project. The developer for that site plan is looking at warehousing or manufacturing, those types of land uses there. So that's going through site plan. So it's good to see activity finally going for Peoria Place. Empire Business Park, number 4, that's roughly centered around 91st and Cactus. It's one of our older business parks, and we've had some vacant land that's been there for a while. We're starting to see some renewed activity there. We have Hopewell, Larkspur, west of 89th Avenue. It's north of Cactus. We have about, it is under construction right now, 92,000 square foot office and warehouse space under construction. And then closer to Cactus, we have what's called Refrigerator Supplies Distributor. They are in site plan review right now. And so that is 2 buildings, 141,000 square feet. So we're seeing a lot more industrial and employment space come forward. Another one, a real exciting one, number 5, and this gets up into our, actually, I'm sorry, this should be 6. This is Converge. We had the numbers transposed there. But number 6 is Converge, and you might recall, I think this came to commission 2 years ago maybe, southwest corner of 75th and Paradise Lane. So this is the city's first vertical mixed-use project. And when I say vertical mixed-use, typically that's ground floor retail, residential above it. And it's more of an urban type of execution, which is exactly the kind of project we're looking for in PD3. And so Converge, this is a 3-acre site. It is a 5-story building. It consists of some ground floor retail, about 2,000 square feet, 195 units of multifamily with a structured parking garage. So we haven't seen much of that in Peoria. That project is now going through construction plan review. So I'm excited that it's gone past site plan. It's continuing to progress forward. So that's good news on that front. And then number 5, Stadium Point, probably when it comes out of the ground, it's going to be one of the most transformational projects in PD3. I think we brought this entitlement to you 4 or 5 months ago, perhaps, and that's when we looked at the building height and the sign package. We now have the site plan in for review, and so just to recall some of the phases, phase one was going to be, if you recall the site plan, it was the activity plaza, which is in the middle of the project. Phase two was a multifamily tower with structured parking, about 151,000 square feet of that. Phase three is the hotel, the north office tower, pads, and the north parking garage, and then phase four was the south office tower, which was be right at the corner of Stadium Way and 83rd Avenue. So that is going through site plan review right now, so we're really excited about that. So that's in progress. Let's go through some other areas in North Peoria. This is 83rd Marketplace, southeast corner of 83rd and Happy Valley. So we've had a building that's been constructed for a while. We've had a dental office come in, and now we're finally getting some traction on some of the restaurants that you've probably read about in the paper out there. But we have some tenant improvements that are coming in for several of those restaurants right now. Phase one is the western half of that 9-acre site. Phase two is vacant right now. I believe we approved a site plan for that, and that's for a multi-tenant retail building on that side of it. Number 8, that's the trailhead. Everybody remembers the trailhead, right? The northeast corner of 83rd and Happy Valley. A lot of interested people in that case, of course. There were 3 components, as you might recall. There was a multifamily component. There was the grocery-anchored commercial component with public space, and there was also the Life Path Church. There was a church component as part of that. So we have 3 site plans that are that have come in. The site plan for the multifamily part of the project is, I should say, it's going through site plan review. The church portion is going through site plan review. The commercial portion, I believe we are nearing readiness to approve the site plan. So the next phase for the commercial part would be then to go into construction plan review. So that is ahead of the other 2 pieces right now a little bit. So we expect that to be approved real soon on that one. The shops at Lake Pleasant. So if you think of the northwest corner of Lake Pleasant and Happy Valley, you might have wondered what that vacant triangular piece is there. It's where the Home Depot and Panera Bread, and there's a couple. You can't quite get to Lake Pleasant on a few areas because of that vacant area, and you probably wondered, geez, why won't that area develop? Why can't we have a connection? Well, that was state land, and state land auctioned that property off. I want to say maybe a year ago or so, and that was bought by Vestar, who developed the rest of the center. So Vestar then came forward, and they submitted site plans for the balance of that development, what they're calling the shops at Lake Pleasant. To report on that, we've approved the site plans. They are now in construction plan review, so that's a mix of shops, restaurants, services, and urgent care, and that's a total of about 58,000 square feet of commercial space. So that's going through construction plan review right now. And then the other one, up in the Vistancia area, the southeast corner of Lone Mountain and El Mirage, there's a 20-acre site there. It's all vacant right now, but it's owned by the Barclay Group, and that is a commercial center that's been submitted for site plan review. It's going to be anchored by a Fry's Marketplace. The Fry's is about 125,000 square feet of space. That's comparable to the Fry's size of the Fry's that you see on Lake Pleasant Parkway. So it's a Fry's Marketplace. And that also includes a fueling center, shops, and restaurants. So that is kind of a really quick synopsis of some of the larger cases. Perhaps before I then go to the part 3, maybe pause right here and see if there's any questions on any development activity in the city.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't see it on the report, but I'm curious about another P83 project. The hotel we had approved at I think it was at Paradise and 75th Avenue on the southwest corner. Remember, on the north side of the canal, had a parking structure built in it, What's the status of that?
Yep, Chair Alsop, Commissioner Nelson. The hotel project that you're referring to, that was a dual-flagged hotel. That was the precursor to Converge. In other words, we had approved the entitlement for that one, and that one never materialized. So then, the hotel group ended up not pursuing that project, and that's when Converge came in, and they got a new entitlement for that property.
Okay. Missed that. So that's on the
Yep.
exact same property.
Correct.
Okay,
That's
that
right.
makes sense. Thank you.
I had a couple questions. The Converge project took 2 years from entitlements until construction document review. Why did it take 2 years? Is that standard? That seems longer than normal to me.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, yeah, 2 years is not standard typically for a entitlement project where we have some public interest. And there was some public interest, usually 9, 10 months. That project, though, had a lot of lag time where the city wasn't in review of the material. So in other words, that material was, we were waiting for a resubmittal of the project. So there was a lot of large periods of time where we didn't have it.
Okay, yeah, that really surprises me. I mean,
Yep.
the demand for apartments right now is out of control. I can't imagine why they're so slow, but that's also an expensive product, but interesting. A couple other questions. Oh, I remembered my question I had. It wasn't for our attorney, but City of Phoenix, when somebody goes over 3 minutes, they have a beeper and it just keeps beeping. It's really irritating. People stop pretty quick.
Like an alarm
So,
clock?
just an idea, it's like your oven that keeps beeping on you. Because they have, some of their meetings go on 6 hours, and sometimes I have the pleasure of watching them, but the beeper is very effective. So just an idea.
Okay.
I'm all for the beeper, by the way. Just a general question. I think some of the tenants in the shops at Lake Pleasant, I know one of them's In-N-Out. There's a Chick-fil-A site. Has there ever been any contact from Chick-fil-A by Target?
Not Chick-fil-A, I believe it's Cane's.
Well, Cane's and In-N-Out are going in the triangle piece.
Right.
Chick-fil-A is south.
Yeah, the southwest
Target.
corner, Chick-fil-A owns a pad there, and they have not come in.
They've never come in for anything.
No.
I'll settle for Cane's, but, yeah, I was really hoping that they were gonna come in with everybody else, but, okay. And then Arizona State Land Department around Lowe's, is there any indication they're gonna be releasing that, for sale as well? That seems to me like a really good site that's never been released.
17 acres, kind of the L-shaped property
Yeah.
around Lowe's, on the general plan, I believe, for single-family and mixed use on the north side.
Yeah.
No, we do meet quarterly with State Land Department. That has not come up. They have their attention on other areas of the city right now.
Anything around Loop 303?
We've talked to them about, so we brought forward what we call Parcel B to this body, and that was roughly around Deer Valley, 109th Avenue. Our next objective was what we call internally Parcel D1, which essentially is around Happy Valley and the 303. So
Okay.
that's the next area where, we would be working with the State Land Department to entitle that property and then work to annex it. Of course, State Land Department, they require that that we not annex a property until we get the entitlement in place as well.
And nothing north of, West Wing, Lake Pleasant Parkway, Loop 303?
That area of state land is in the city already.
Correct. I mean, there's been no development interest or somebody coming in to sponsor a sale of state lands?
Nothing that I can report publicly, no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, we'll go on to part 3.
Thank you. So as Chris said, I have the pleasure of the next couple of slides, and let me start off kind of the process improvement discussion by going back to the all-encompassing general plan, because that's why we do what we do. And more specifically, one of the values that's built into the general plan and adopted by the voters is that we as a city are striving to provide superior public service, day in and day out. And that's not an easy feat, but it is one that is worthwhile. And it does take some rolling up of the sleeves occasionally, looking in the mirror, reaching out for feedback, listening to our customers, and also when we look in that mirror, take an accurate reflection of what we're seeing. And so hence what you see on the screen is one of those times that we've looked in the mirror and said, how are we doing? So as Chris mentioned, we do a customer satisfaction survey. We do team up with, the planning department joins with development and engineering in sending out a customer survey Last one we did was about 5 years, but we do these on a semi-regular basis as needed. And we send it out to a range of participants, as you see. Although 512 provided a response, it was everybody that had submitted an application within the last 2 years was contacted to provide feedback to us as to how we did. And that was quite a list, but 512 participants did participate. As you see on the screen, homeowners, business owners, developers, home builders, professional development consultants, and contractors. As Chris said, those results are currently under review, and we did receive a lot of comments, so there's a lot to dig through in there. And in particular, there's a working group made up of staff to identify potential areas of improvement, and we'll kind of touch on that here briefly. But first, there are areas that we did well, and we want to acknowledge those. So what you see on the screen is, and this is kind of surprising, but 67% of our respondents were homeowners. These are our mom and pops. They typically don't get into the development process, except for maybe once in a while. They certainly don't necessarily know all of the terminology or the process right off the bat. But we reached out, and 67% of that 512, those folks, the mom and pops, reach out and let us know. And so that's important to kind of help shade what you see on the conversation. So overall satisfaction. We hit it out of the park, either somewhat or very, 88% of the time. There's areas of improvement there, but that's not a bad starting spot, you know. Expectations, did we meet or exceed their expectations? 87% of the time we did it. So again, not bad, but we're aiming for superior services, and there's room for improvement. Our staff response times, how quickly we get back to somebody, whether it's through email, phone call, et cetera. Did we meet or exceed their expectations? 89% of the time, yes. They said we were incredibly responsive, polite, et cetera. So those are areas we're doing well. Again, always room for improvement because we're aiming for superior. Not good, not great, superior. So we have really high standards. In terms of areas of improvement, these are just 4 in particular, and it's worth noting that we need to dive into some of the analysis on this particular one. But website usefulness, we missed the mark 16% of the time for folks. They said we could have done a better job. So they were looking for something, they didn't find something, it wasn't easily available. And that's why, as you see on the ongoing efforts as part of this year and into 23, we're doing website refreshes, both on the city side and the planning department. We're reformatting our information on the website to mobilizing it. You can use it from your mobile device versus desktop. We're trying to streamline the information to make it faster. So 84% said we did a great job, but we need to work on the 16%. So that's where we need to dive into the information in terms of, are we missing something that we can provide on that website to make it just a little bit more effective. And one of the things that we'll look at later on is in the next slide that we'll talk about. But plan review times. So we had 77% that we either met or exceeded the expectations, but we missed the mark 23% of the time. Why was that? Was it a miscommunication? Was it a missed expectation? Was it an opportunity for us to provide a little bit more information up front as to what was going on? Those are the things that we need to think about. And in those instances where we might have had those comments, was it a one-off occurrence? Was there something in particular that kind of provided some additional context in there? Or do we have a reoccurring issue and a process that we need to tweak a little bit to make it more streamlined? So plan review times, that's something that we're going to be digging into. Forms and checklist. This is one in particular. I know we need to improve on, because the forms and the checklists are the bread and butter for our professional development crew that work with us on a regular basis. They want the forms quickly, the applications need to make sense. They're working with a number of municipalities, and so the process guides need to be as clear and as concise as possible, because they want to know what our expectations are for getting plans through. Last thing we want to do is have them submit something that's not to our standards. So how we communicate our standards are through those forms, checklists, and process guides. So 15% of the time we miss the mark, we know we can do better. That's one of the things that we're looking at updating and streamlining on that particular one. Part of that is also just ease of finding the information for them. They want to find it faster. Get in, get out. What do you need? The last one it was kind of an interesting one for me, which is electronic document review. And so this is basically from start to finish. You don't have to step foot in the door to the city to submit a plan, get the plan reviewed, pay for it, get your permit, and go out the door. Not a lot of our homeowners would necessarily, that's not something that they would normally do. So it's been a little bit of a transition from some of our home remodels and things of that nature, but where we've seen the most success day in and day out are the commercial sites, the preliminary plats for the home builders, things of that nature. Most of those, it's a time savings and a cost savings. There's no more paper. They don't have to wait to make sure that a courier can come down. The doors are open. They're processing their stuff seamlessly and faster these days. And that was recognized in that response. But again, there's areas of improvement. We need to see what those comments were and take from that if there are things that we need to work on and what those would be. Even still, 86% of the time, we did a good job. So that's a good starting spot. So those are just a snapshot in time of the information. There's more to come. There's a working group, like I said, and I think Chris can allude to some of those endeavors as well.
Well, I was just going to mention, so about this survey, it was done through SurveyMonkey. We send it out to folks. We have some structured questions, and these are the same questions we used 5 years ago, so we have some comparability there. But we always leave an open-ended response to the extent that folks want to offer just open-ended responses to things. And the intent would be that if they're willing to leave their contact information, that we contact every single one of them and talk through their individual concerns or questions they might have. And so we still need to do that, and as Lori indicated, there's a lot of information we have. We just showed a snapshot tonight. We need to get back and digest and really figure out what it is that we're hearing and what we need to do improvements that we might need to make to kind of get to that superior service that we're looking for.
So with that's just one focus, and like I said, website usefulness, so let me give you a preview of things to come. So in light of, or in honor of, one of the two, depending on how you want to think about it, one of the items that most recently came before the commission was the text amendment to enhance the notification requirements. That is going before council for consideration August 23rd. With that rollout is an opportunity. And what we're looking at doing is collaborating with the Office of Communication to create a video, a 1 to 2 minute video, primarily geared for our residents about how they can provide feedback and ask questions during the process. And there's at various stages of the process. So it's meant to be kind of a quick hit. Here's some information. If you have more, contact the planning department. We can answer your questions. But it's going to be informative and a good first step as we roll that out. So stay tuned. We will be providing that on the website. That is one of a few video considerations that we're looking at doing. As Cody has narrated the opening video for the commission, there might be cameo appearances by all on future videos. So if you have suggestions on what you would like to see for content, thinking of from the resident perspective, let us know. We do already have a few ideas, but we're happy to take suggestions just to provide that information out there. So, one of the last items for this evening is upcoming study session topics. So I will kind of pick on the gentleman at the end of the table a little bit at some point here shortly, but let's start with the sustainability plan. Also going to the August 23rd council meeting for consideration is the update to the city's sustainability plan. There are a lot of great information. It lays out objectives, goals, and kind of a timeline for those improvements. As Chris alluded to, some of those items that fall on the planning side, such as the landscape update, that code update, that's a part of that conversation that we're already working towards advancing that timeline. But we are inviting Victoria Castor to come before commission to provide to talk about all things sustainability, third quarter. In fact, it will be September 15th is the date that she is looking to join us on that particular topic. The reason why I do want to pick on the gentleman at the end is the next one, the traffic division update. So for some of the commission, this will be a repeat. However, some of the video snapshots that you've seen tonight, the TV, we will be doing a tour of the Traffic Management Center coming in the fourth quarter. So not only will this gentleman be able to show you all the ins and outs and how really cool they actually are and what kind of cool toys they have, but you'll get to see it in action and ask the questions. So that is coming as well. We do recognize and know that we are in time of becoming more water smart these days, and we've already had that initial conversation with Kay Powers, the director, and Brett. We're inviting them back towards the end of the year to have water resources discussion 2.0, so stay tuned. Things have changed a little bit, so there's some additional information that they'll talk about on that particular one. Also, by request, we are inviting our Economic Development Services folks back to the table for an update for commission as well. And then last but not least, I know Commissioner Nelson, you did ask about housing affordability. We are trying to make arrangements on how best to come up with a study session for that evening that is informative. So stay tuned, that will be announced. It may not land before this year, but it's coming shortly on that particular one. So those are the study session topics coming up. As always, if you have ideas for more or you would like to learn about something else, please let us know. We can make arrangements. Other than that, I'm at the end of my slide for any questions.
Thank you, Lori. Commissioner Nelson.
Thank you, Chairman. Very helpful information. Thank you for arranging this, Chris, and for all of you presenting very valuable information. Yeah, I've been a little alarmed. I heard the Tier 2 restrictions are going to require some Colorado River cuts, pretty significant for Arizona. And I would love it when that study session we can touch on how that's going to impact the city, our general plan, things we need to be thinking about as a commission, because that's a pretty big cut to our allocation of Colorado River water. Now, again, this is statewide, I understand that, but certainly it's going to impact municipalities like Peoria. So I hope we'll get into a little bit of that, because my impression is that's pretty serious, and it may impact some of the projects coming our way.
Yeah, just also towards that point, next Tuesday night, council's back in session, so they have a couple study session items starting at 4:30. One of those is a presentation from Water Resources, so that would be a good one. If you can't watch it live, they do tape it, so you can watch that one.
Commissioner Waitman.
Thank you, Chair. A wonderful presentation, very exciting. I thought it was so exciting to see the updates on those development cases. Very exciting that some of those are going to be managed by Greystar. As some of you all may know, my background is in HR, staffing and employment in multifamily property management. So I just know that they're a premier company, and we should be proud of the work that we're doing, because not only are we developing our beautiful city, it is truly creating employment opportunities, from leasing consultants to maintenance technicians to some even entry-level jobs as far as porters. And I know that we're building, but just knowing that some of those properties are managed by properties that are premier, and they focus on that, is wonderful. So I'm just excited to see this grow. And I'm very excited about the traffic engineering department tour. As you all know, I've been telling my fellow commissioners that I missed out a few years back, so I'm very excited about that. But thank you all for the work that you all have been doing, and we can be very proud knowing that we are influencing so many different things within our city, so thank you.
All right, everyone, thank you, appreciate that. Any other comments from commissioners? All right, with that, we'll call to the public for any non-agenda items. Seeing none here tonight, we'll proceed to 6R, reports from staff.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, as a reminder, you do have the opportunity to have an extended Labor Day weekend starting early, as the September 1st meeting is canceled, so please enjoy responsibly. We would like to see you back September 15th. That is when Victoria will be joining us, as well as our new commissioner. So we will be at full capacity coming soon. So please join us September 15th. And that is all for this evening.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll adjourn this meeting.